All right, AP Human Geography classes, here's our next video in industry. Why are situation factors important? Let's talk about that. All right, so what is a situation? Well, it's one of the two geographic costs we're going to talk about when related to industry. The other one is site. But first, let's focus on situation. This involves transportation, specifically transporting materials to and from a factory, and the overall goal is to minimize the cost. Now, it examines two of the following features. It's the cost of transporting raw materials to the factory, and then from the factory to the producing the finished product to the market. Okay, let's talk about proximity of inputs, or AKA raw materials. So manufacturers attempt to locate their factory between the buyers and the sellers. It just really depends on what type of industry it is. Now, who are the buyers and sellers? Well, the sellers include companies that harvest, let's say, the raw materials, and the buyers include, well, people like us, or basically where the market is. So some inputs, right, raw materials again, some inputs actually weigh more than the final product. This is what's called bulk reducing industry, and two examples are copper and steel. So let's take a guess where these factories are going to be located. Chances are probably closer to where the raw materials are. Let's talk about a specific item. Let's talk about copper. Well, here's what happens with copper. Copper is an example of a bulk reducing industry. It first begins with mining the ore, then it's sent to a concentration mill. Now, these mills are located very close to where they mine because, again, copper is heavy, all right, and this costs money to transport these items. The heavier the item, the more it costs. All right, then here in the mills, they're crushed and then grinded into fine particles. Then they're sent to a smelter, that's correct, where they do smelting, which is the bottom right corner there. And what this does, it reduces the weight. And then again, when it's transferred to the refining industry, actually the cost as well. And so here at the refinery, it's produced into what we know as copper. All right, so again, each step along these lines is reducing the weight and thus reducing the cost of transportation. And all of these places are located relatively close to the input or to where the raw materials are being harvested from because, once again, cost of transportation. All right, let's talk about proximity to market. This is important to three different types of industry, which include the following: bulk gaining industry, which is the opposite of bulk reducing, right? We start with a heavy product, then go to a product that weighs less, to a bulk gaining product, which means that the product at the end, the finished product, weighs more or has greater volume. Second is single market, which basically is specialized manufacturers that only really sell to one or two customers, and therefore they're going to be close to them. And last but not least is perishable items, which are products that quickly expire. All right, let's talk about bulk gaining industries. These are always located near where the product is sold, right? Again, it gets heavier as you go. So one example is fabricated metals. So televisions, refrigerators, even cars, these are going to be closer to their markets or consumers than they are going to be to the raw materials. Again, another example is the beverage production that includes soft drinks or alcohols. They are once again going to be closer to market because it costs more to ship heavier products than the raw materials, which weigh less and cost less to transport. All right, talk about single market. Again, it's sold to one or two customers, and once again, it's close to the buying customer. Now, the only time there is an exception is when there's cheaper labor. For example, when companies, let's say, locate to a foreign country, cheaper labor actually lessens the cost of transportation, even though we're transporting from around the world. So an example of this are parts for manufacturing a car. You can see the picture here. There are a ton of parts that go into a car, right? Hundreds of parts. These are called just-in-time parts. These parts are delivered minutes, hours before they're actually needed instead of days and weeks in advance. So they really... All right, talk about perishable items. These are items or even information that expire quickly. And here are some examples. Newspapers, right? You're not going to want a newspaper 3 days later. So it needs to be close to where the consumers buy or where you are. Milk products, we know that goes bad. Cheese, obviously cheese goes bad as well. It gets moldy. And same with bread. These are just examples of industries that need to be close to their consumers. All right, let's talk about different transportation modes. What should a company use to transport their goods? Well, they first off seek out the lowest cost, right? We know this. I've said this about 10 times already for transportation. Now, again, it depends on the distance of goods to market. So the most common and most often used for short distances is the truck, and usually goods that can be transported in less than a day, trucks are therefore used. Another transportation mode is trains. Now, these are also used for short distances, but if it takes more than a day, they'll use a train over a truck. Our last two transportation modes, one is a ship. This is the cheapest long distance method. Then obviously it's usually used for overseas shipping. Yes, sometimes do companies transport goods, let's say down a river via shipping line? Absolutely, but for the most part, it's overseas shipping. And last transportation mode is air. This is by far the most expensive mode of transportation and is thus used for speedy deliveries or high value packages. Now, also, when considering transportation, there's something called a break of bulk point, and this is basically a transference of using two or more different modes of transportation. So, for example, if let's say trains or trucks meet up at a airport or a seaport, these are actually break of bulk points where they use two different types of transportation points and meet up at this certain location. All right, guys, that's it. Quick little roundup. We'll talk much more about situation in our next video site. More in class. See you then.